So first of all, I want to start by saying that really today is a day that we saw another miracle in the string of miracles that are happening. The miracle I'm talking about right now, besides the miracles that are happening in Eretz Yisrael, is the miracle that happened here in America, which we know makes a huge, huge difference for Eretz Yisrael, that President Trump was elected, a president who's committed to the same principles as we are, and not blaming Israel for these things that happen. Even the president, she almost said explicitly, but it just hinted to it, that what Israel is doing is genocide. Could you imagine we'd have such a president? So Baruch Hashem, and it is a miracle. First of all, I want you to know that in the United States of America, it's the second time in history that such thing should happen. That a person is a president, and then ends the presidency, and the next time around comes the president again. Last time it happened was over 100 years ago, and it never happened other than that. Second of all, this is a person that has been battered and attacked for 8 consecutive years. I don't know if since he became president, he had one single day of peace and quiet. Everybody was attacking him, allegations. The media, which is the strongest, most influential force in the world, attacking him on a daily basis while he was president. After he finished the presidency, tried to arrest him, get him into jail. Everything was tried. And imagine, like, you take a glass and throw it against the wall one time, a second time, a third time, a 10th time, it doesn't break. So to me, this is a miracle. The person believes in Hashem. He says that Hashem's spirit is life because he has a shlichus. He calls it a mission. But in Hebrew, it's a shlichus. Basically, he understands that he has a shlichus. Of course, he's a human being, and he needs the Eibish's brachas to do the right thing. But that's something amazing. It's really a miracle from our part. And what we're seeing is miracles. So we should see more and more miracles until the ultimate miracle. We're on the way. We're on the right track, Rabbi is saying. That's one miracle. Second miracle is what happened yesterday in Argentina. You probably heard. If not, I'll tell it to you now. But basically, yesterday, the president of Argentina swore in the new foreign minister. Okay, that's normal. But because the foreign minister is a Jew, he swore him in with the Torah, not with the Bible, with the Torah. Even if you hear the Spanish, I sent it to Shuli, the video, she has it. You hear the Spanish, he says, swearing you on Torah. That's not it yet. After he swore him in, and he's committing himself, then he said a Dvar Torah. On Parsha's Lech Lecha. You hear him saying Lech Lecha, it's the Parsha. And he said a Dvar Torah in the Parsha, and the Dvar Torah was that just like Abraham went out there in the world and he spread the emes and everything about Hashem, you too will go out there and your job is to spread truth and honesty, whatever, to the nations, to the world. I mean, tell me, when in history did you have that the president of a country is talking about the Parsha of the week? By the way, it's also interesting that only 2 days earlier, in Hayom Yom, it says that the Alter Rebbe told his Chassidim that he wants them to live with the Parsha, with the times. And they didn't know what that means. What do you mean, live with the times? Live with the times normally means, follow the fashion, the things that the people live with. But the Alter Rebbe's brother said to them, he verified what the Alter Rebbe meant was to live with the Parsha of the week. That was the second day of Cheshvan in Hayom Yom. So why is this so miraculous? Because this is one of the things that are going to happen when Mashiach comes, that the nations of the world are going to use Torah as a guide for their way of life, for their values, and that's what we see happening. And to a certain extent, Argentina in some ways is almost one of the worst countries in the world from a certain extent. Why is that? This is the country that has been sort of the escape for the Nazis for all the years. This is when when they covered up on them, they hid them. That's where Eichmann was found. So it's really a very dark place from that perspective. And this place, Davka, and the president, by the way, he finished off his speech by saying, and I wish you, like the Rebbe would say, Bracha Batzlacha. You can hear it on the video. It's in Spanish, but you can hear him saying the Rebbe. Okay. Back to Earth over here. Okay, one more thing about the Parsha. I will give this out. You want just to look at it, but also something that is relevant to our times now. This week's Parsha is the Parsha where Hashem promises Avraham Avinu the land of Israel. And he tells them that this is the land for you and your descendants. And this is the source where Hashem said it's going to be our land. And Hashem made a covenant, the bris, with Avraham Avinu. But then the sheet I'm giving out to you is Parshas Lech Lecha, chapter Tezvav, Pasuk Yud Beis. It describes how Avraham Avinu received this prophetic vision. And it says, the sun went down, Pasuk Yud Beis. The Tardema Nofla Avram, a very deep sleep fell on Avram. That's how the Nevi'im, that's how the prophets receive prophecy. And then it says, I underlined it, Ema Chashecha Gedela, a big, dark fear or dread of Felis Allah fell upon him. So all the Mefarshim talk about the four terms that are used, Ema, Chashecha, Gedela, and Felis Allah. One means fear or dread, one means darkness, one is big, and one fell on him. So the Mefarshim explained that this is alluding to the different nations. They told Avraham Avinu that they will be persecuting us in Golus, Bavel, and so on and so forth. So there are different interpretations which nations we're talking about. If you turn to the other side of the page, where it's underlined, here's, by the way, what we spoke about in the minor, the two Targums, Targum Yerushalmi, Targum Yenis and Ben Azil, and on this side of the page is Targum Onkelos. You have all three Targums there on this sheet. So Targum Yenis Ben Azil says like this. You see where it's underlined, it's Aramaic, it's pure Aramaic. Arba Malkin, there'll be four kings, four kingdoms that they're going to persecute us in Golus. And then he lists who they are. But he says the last one, when it says, Nafal Allah, fall upon him, that's referring to Paras. See what's underlined? Paras. Paras is Persia. Persia is Iran. Sida Lamepo, it will ultimately fall. The less lazy kifa, it won't rise again. Mitamon, and from that fall, Asidim Lemesak Amma Beis Yisrael. In the future, that's when Yidden will be going out of Golus. So this is what we're dealing with right now. In fact, we're on the way for Iran to have their fall, not God forbid people, but the regime and the power and the force that they have should become null and void. And we should see the next part of the prophecy that from this comes the Geula Mitzvah Shlema. It's interesting, even in 1991, when the Rebbe spoke about Iraq, who was attacking us, and the Rebbe brought a medrash, but the Rebbe emphasized then also Persia. The medrash says that there'll be nations provoking one another, and then specifically points out the king of Persia, Melech Paras. And in fact, the medrash says it'll be in an area which the Rebbe refers to, and that's the way the whole world refers to it as the Persian Gulf. Again, emphasizing the relationship with Persia. So you should see this very soon. Maybe this belonged in the next class, which is Mashiach Gula, but I couldn't contain myself, so my apologies. Good morning. Okay, we're going back to the Maimer here. As I told you, this is a little bit of a more complicated part, but let's try the best we can to explain it. So again, we're going to explain the difference between the two terms. And if you look in your book, what page was it that I showed you that? That chart, so you can see the two terms. One is Ila v'Olu, and the other one is Yeshme Ayin. That's on page 66a. And there are 4 points that make the difference between the two, Ila v'Olu and Yeshme Ayin. So first of all, just the definition. Yesh Ma'ayin, you're more familiar with, it means something out of nothing. Ilavalo means, the word Ila means cause, and Olo could either be translated as the outcome, or the effect, or the result. There's a cause and there's a result. There's a cause and there's an outcome. Something that's created from that cause. That's called Ilavalo. So here we are on page... Ouch. Oh yeah, they put it up. And he didn't fall on its head, it fall on the right side, it's safe and sound. I think we're on page 61. We did this at the end of the shir list yesterday, so we'll do it quick. But let's say the words inside and then explain. In a inyan bria yeshmi ayin, udava hamishava, nistata mebchinas dava hamishava. So the creating force has to conceal itself from whatever is being created. If the creative force would not be concealed and withheld from the creation, then whatever it is would never be able to be created. That's the Yesh Miyayin. When it comes to Ila v'Olu, again, this is referring to everything and anything. Anything physical, spiritual, any kind of thing. There's always these two modes of things happening. One is cause and outcome or effect, and the other is something happening out of nothing, which is only by Hashem, of course. So what would be an example of cause and effect? So he says a little bit later that the example would be, let's say, take an example, seichel and midas. We started talking about this yesterday. Intellect and emotion. So we know that emotion is born out of the intellect. What does that mean? It means you would think emotions in the heart. You feel angry, you feel in love, you feel upset, you feel curious, you feel anxious, whatever you feel. But the Rabbi explains in Tanya, it's based on the Zohar, whatever you feel is a result of the way you understand and perceive things. In other words, if you're afraid of something, it's because you know in your head this is something to be afraid of. If you wouldn't know in your head it's something to be afraid of, you wouldn't have fear. So little children could do things that are very dangerous, and not because they're very courageous. It's they have no clue that this is dangerous, what they're doing. If you don't understand that it's dangerous, you don't feel fear. If there's something that you're pursuing, you want something, the reason why you want it is because in your head, your brain tells you this is something good. And therefore, if it's good, you want to have it. Whether it be money, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's something else. If you understand that it's good, then you want it. So therefore, all the Chassidus is based on his bonus. I want to develop in my heart a feeling of love for Hashem. Think about A, B, and C. And if you think about it deeply, you will see that this will create within you love for Hashem. You want to experience feeling of fear of Hashem, do the same. Think about something else, and that'll develop in your heart a feeling of fear of Hashem. If you see another person that's in a situation and you want to feel compassion for that person, think about A, B, and C, and you'll feel compassion, and so on and so forth. Everything works that way. So, seichel, intellect, is ila. The emotion is the olu, right? So, I don't think sure where to start. So let me start from this point. The says in Chassidus that the olu is really not a totally new creation. Why? Because I already have this in my head, that being that this is something very valuable, My brain dictates to me, therefore I should want it. If my brain wouldn't give me that message, then my heart wouldn't want it. In fact, there's a word for this. So this is a chapter in Tanya in the beginning that talks about this. And that is, there is midos, there's emotion in the heart, and there's emotion in the brain. What does it mean, emotion in the brain? Using the analogy, just like parents and children. If intellect is the parents and emotion is the children, we think of it the same way. A baby is born, the new creation. Then you say, no, it's not so new. This baby, with all its organs and all its veins and all its bones and all its muscles and everything, already existed in the womb of the mother before the baby was born. What really happened was before it was part of the mother, and now it took on its own independent identity. The same is with seichel and midos. Before a person feels in their heart, when I say feel in their heart, I mean a real sensation. I feel drawn to something or to someone. I feel fear towards someone. There had to be a process that first the brain understands that this is dangerous, or the brain understands that this is valuable. The brain also tells me that because of that, you should want it. And that eventually evolves into the heart, and there's an actual sensation of the heart to want it. That means that the feeling in my heart already existed in my head. But in my head, it was part of the brain realm, part of the intellectual realm. And later, when it goes into the heart, it has an identity of its own, just like a baby. Yesh me'ayin is not that way. Yesh me'ayin means something out of nothing, meaning that this something did not exist in its source. Not only didn't exist the way it is, it didn't even exist as a something inside the source. Like emotion is in the head in a different way, but it starts in the head. But yesh me'ayin means that the yesh comes from a source where it doesn't exist in the source in any way possible, no form or shape at all. So where does it begin to exist? Only once the ayin creates it. So yesh me'ayin is a real, true, new existence. Ilava'ol is not totally new. There are other examples. The sun shining. Which would be the Ila, which would be the Ol? You see sunlight. Like today, Baruch Hashem, you have sunlight, there's a record breaker. We haven't had such weather in who knows how many years. Warm, it's going to be warm, continue to be warm. So you look outside, you see sunlight. Why is there sunlight? So you can understand the minor better, right? That's why there's sunlight. So, which is the Ila, which is the Ol? Is the, and the sunlight is the Ol. So this light that's shining in all here on earth, is it a new creation or the light already existed inside the sun? What? Yeah, it's in the sun. The sun is a ball of light, a source of light. So in the sun is already light. And that light is so powerful that it bursts out from the sun and shines over millions and millions of miles in outer space. So the sunlight is also not yesh me'ayin, it's Ila v'ol. It already existed in the source. Any example you give of Ila v'ol means it existed in the source. So even when you take something like a seed and you plant it in the ground and a tree grows out, the fact that this is an apple tree and not an orange tree is because it's a different kind of seed. That means there's something in the seed which is already the source for apples, and there's something in a different seed which is already the source for oranges, and something in a different seed which is the source for esrog. So that means that it already existed in some way, in some subtle way, in the source. So the seed is the Ilah, and the tree is the Ol. Yes.
I think in a new creative way, is that like a newness or from like within us that's existing?
Good question. So even if I decide to act in a new creative way, in essence, it's not totally new. Because it must be that I had that within me, I had the potential. New means that until now, I didn't bring out that potential. And now I did. So imagine a person had no idea that they're artistically inclined. Someone noticed it and said, you know what? I think you have You have a push in art. Come, let me help you. And they become the biggest artists in the world. It looks like it's new because for the first 20 years of their life, they had no idea. But it's really not new. That talent was there, and you did something to develop the talent. And the same with everything we do: intellect, emotion, art, speech, writing, anything a person develops means you have it in you. And even if you weren't a born sort of artist and you developed it, you still have to have the potential for it in you in order for it to come out. To give another example of what we learned in the beginning of last year, we learned this in Shar Yichud V'Amunah, where the Alter Rebbe says that if you take a piece of gold and you make a menorah out of it, is that Yesh Me'ayin or is that Ilav Olam? Right. And the Alter Rebbe explains that why is it Ilav Olam? Remember, we spoke about this those who were here last year. Why is it Ilav Olam? The menorah is something new totally. There was no menorah here before. The answer is there was no menorah, but the piece of gold or silver carries in it the potential to be formed and shaped in any form and shape. If I would take a piece of gold and rubber would come out of it, that would be Yesh Me'ayin. Yeah.
There's the Yesh Me'ayin are these just two separate
tracks. Yeah. You won't use that term. Now there's another thing. And the other thing is that, again, going back to the example of the menorah, being that it's Ilav Olam, which means this explains another difference between Yesh Me'ayin and Ilav Olam. When something is created out of nothing, it can't continue to exist without its source. That's why Hashem has to constantly recreate the world. But in the case of Ilav Olam, the Olam could continue to exist without its source. For example, we just gave the menorah. You take a piece of gold and you heat it up and you form the gold into a beautiful menorah. You don't need to sit there and stand there the whole time and make sure that it remains a menorah. Why not? If you something that was not there before and I created it, how does it continue to exist without me? Just like we say about Hashem. The answer is no. When it's Yesh Me'ayin, you need Hashem's force constantly because it has no existence, it has no identity, it has no substance without the source. This is the much that always comes to my mind, but it's just helps to understand. There's certain things in the world that even though it's not natural, but if you really work with it a long time, and you go to the circus and you see animals doing really interesting things, elephants and tigers and all sorts of animals. That's not their nature. How do they manage to do it? That a tiger or elephant should do the things that it does. What? What does training mean? Right. What the person is doing is it makes them do it once and twice and 3 times and 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, and finally they get into the mode of doing it. They develop that pattern, right? So what if you take a doll and you walk with it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? Theoretically, you walk with it for 1,000 days. And you make sure not to stop in the middle. When you go to sleep, someone else will take over. So a doll's walking for 1,000 consecutive years. And you let go, what's going to happen? Right, you won't be able to bring it to the circus. What's the difference? Why, in the case of the animal, when I'm at it consistently and over, eventually the pattern changes? Why doesn't that happen to a doll? That's the answer. If you can take a cat, you know the famous story of the Ramban, that the Ramban was a advisor to the king of wherever he lived. And there were also non-Jewish advisors. Very often they would get into arguments. They would try to prove him wrong because he was the most favored by the king. So one time they had an argument whether you can really change the nature of an animal. And his argument was, no, you can't. And they said you could. So they put him to the test. They took a cat and they worked with this cat for a very long time. And they taught the cat how it could be like a waiter bringing food to the table. And they actually made a big party because they were going to celebrate the downfall of the Ramban. So they're sitting by this party, And there's a cat walking on two legs, not four, has something in its hand, and somehow or other it's bringing it, and everybody's clapping their hands, yay, and everybody's excited. And they look at the Ramban, they figure his face turns red, blue, green, very calm, puts his hand in his pocket, pulls out a mouse, puts it down on the floor. The mouse starts running, and the cat drops the plate with all the food and runs right after the mouse. Basically, what does it mean? A cat is a cat. You can't change the nature. You can push it to do something different, but doesn't, in essence, the instinct of a cat is the instinct of a cat. It doesn't change. So the fact that he can get a cat to do something which normally doesn't do must mean that it has the potential to do it. And therefore, if you keep at it 10 days, 20 days, 10 years, 20 years, eventually you can have a cat or an elephant or another animal doing something which is different. That's called, that means because it has the potential. If it has the potential, it's not yesh miyayin. It means this nature was already there before, and I was successful in developing that second nature. In Chassidus, it's called Teva Sheni, second nature. You're focusing on the wrong part of the story. Usually when I tell the story, people say, so did the cat catch the mouse? Yeah. That's not the objective of the story. Had a very deep pocket, don't worry. So the doll is a diamond, it's inanimate, has no life to it, doesn't have the potential to walk in any way possible. So even if you walk it for 10 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, the second you let go, it falls because there's no potential there. So it's only walking because I am making it walk. The moment I let go of my hand, it falls apart. Same with the world. Hashem created the world yesh miyayin, which means there was no world before. There wasn't even a potential. It's not that there was some sort of raw material or raw potential that Hashem developed it into a world. There was nothing here. Ayin, nothing. So when Hashem created the world, it was only because of him that there is a world. So the moment he lets go, there is no world. Like let's say intellect and emotion. Sometimes a person thinks about something and it develops a certain emotion. And later he's not focusing so much on the intellectual part of it, but the emotion stays because it's a separate, it has its own, a life of its own, so to speak. So first it existed in the intellect. I was once at a friend's wedding, and I knew this friend for many years. I knew his family. And I walk into the wedding hall, and I see someone sitting at the table, the front table. He looks very similar to this person's father, but I never saw him before. So I figured maybe it's a relative who lives far away. So I asked him, who is this person? He said, no, my father's brother. Really? I never saw him anywhere by the bar mitzvah, by the wedding, by all the peoples. Where does he live? New Jersey. Really? All these years, I never saw him. Well, yeah, they got into a fight. And they didn't talk to each other. So what happened? They forgot why they were fighting. So they decided, okay, let's get together again. So sometimes you can get emotional about something. You forgot already the reason where it came from, but the emotion could still be there. So anyway, this is another difference between yesh mi'ayin and ilav olam. Yesh mi'ayin, the yesh, which was created, cannot continue to exist without its source. When you have talk about ilav olam, the olam does continue to exist without the source. And the reason is the other point, being that the olam is not really a new creation, so it doesn't depend on its source totally. It has its own identity, but before it was inside the source, and now it comes out. But it has its own identity, its own source. So if you look at the sheet, page 66a, the first one, A, says the yesh does not exist in the source, which means the ayin, at all, not even potentially. The olam exists potentially in the source, which is the ego. As a result of that, we have the second difference, which is B. When the yesh is created, it's considered an absolutely new thing, something which is absolutely new. When the olam is created, it's not considered new, but something which already existed potentially in the source. Are these 2 points clear so far? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Another example of your time that was something you said continued to exist, trying to enforce.
Well, the truth is, there isn't any other example. Why? Because only Hashem, the only example I gave you is think of something which is not created Yeshmayim, but like the example where I'm walking the doll or something else like that, that there's no potential there, but I'm making it happen. Something from the outside makes it happen. And the moment that outside force stops, like the paper blowing in the wind. If the wind blows and the paper is flying in the air, even if it will go on for a very long time, the paper will never become a flying object, even though the wind causes it to fly. That means that when it's flying, the ability to fly comes from someplace outside of itself. It's not in it. And therefore, when that outside force stops, it falls down instantly. It won't even continue to fly for another 30 seconds. We're not being very generous, but that's what's going to happen. The wind is blowing for hours. The second it stops, the paper falls. Why? Because it has no potential in it at all to fly. So we don't have a real example of Yesh Me'ayin because only Hashem could do Yesh Me'ayin. Humans can't. Anything human create, even if an artist creates a beautiful picture, the canvas was here before, the paint was here before, the brush was here before, everything was here before, and the talent in my hand to be able to move, make those movements that will create this beautiful picture was also here before. Everything was here before. Person is a composer and compose a new nigga that we never heard before. In a sense, it's new, but it's really not totally new because it already existed within me the potential to put together these notes and to be a beautiful melody and so on. So true Yesh Man is only Hashem. There are things that are happening that are somewhat similar to Yesh Man. And usually in Chassidus they bring the 2 examples, either things growing out of the ground or a baby born, like the closest to Yesh Man. But both of them are not real Yesh Man. Exactly. It's better than the doll, because with the doll, it's obvious that it's not walking on its own. Hashem is walking like a doll, and we perceive it as if we're doing it on its own. I was told a story that I read an article. Someone said that he was in a taxi, and he's sitting in the back seat, and there's a steering wheel in the back seat. So he has a taxi driver. Why do you have a steering wheel in the back seat? So he starts laughing. He says, I have a 3-year-old. Every time I get in the car, he wants to sit in the front and drive the car. It drove me crazy. I couldn't. So what I did was I put a steering wheel in the back. He turns the wheel, and he thinks that he's driving the car. So he's happy, and I'm happy. Everybody's happy. So the same as the Eibishter created us in a way. We think that we're steering the steering wheel. That the reason why this happened or that happened, Trump was elected because this person did this and that person did that, and they invested a lot of money. And all that, by the way, is true. That's the Derech HaTeva. But the real reason is Hashem is working on it the whole way through.
There are choices and consequences.
But it's still, everything is still being controlled by Hashem. I know you can ask me, so where's the free choice? That's the question where it's a very deep question and needs a lot of explanation. I think one time Rabbi Patil got into that. He'll do a good job. And take him up on it.
Wednesday when you can.
What? Oh, it's Wednesday. Okay.
When things look like you drove the steering wheel, like you did this, and therefore there's nothing. Like
right. So that's the whole difficulty. On one hand, Hashem gives me free choice.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's not totally independent of Hashem because nothing is independent of Hashem. So that's the hard part to understand. The only place where we need to really meditate on this and understand this, I told you once, I think I told the class many times, is the difference between the past and the future. When it comes to the future, I have to focus on the fact that I have free choice. When I'm looking back at the past, that's when I have to remember that Hashem is the one who's driving the car, and I'm just doing the steering wheel. And it's not really, go back, it's all because of me, I made this happen, it's my fault. Whether it's Gashmis or Ruchnis, and I beat myself up, The answer is no. Ultimately, it's all Hashem, and therefore there must be a purpose, and the purpose must be for good, and that gives us a whole different perspective on the past. So even though both things are true, and it's very hard to understand how to reconcile both, but I think practically speaking, let's work it this way. If it's about the future, focus on the fact that we have free choice. If I have to do something, if it's not me doing, of course, it's just the Tachan and Hashem. But if I have to do something, I can't say the Tachan Hashem. I have to use my free choice to do the right thing. If it's the past, that's when we need to focus on that we're just turning the steering wheel, but Hashem is really driving the car. So these are the two things on this paper, the A and B. Now we come to C and D, the other two things. No, actually, we did D also. A, B, and D we already covered. We didn't do C. Number one, that the yesh exists in the source. I mean that yesh me'ayin, the yesh which was created doesn't exist in the source. Number two, therefore, it's not really a new creation, an absolutely new creation. It looks like a new creation, but in essence, it's just a potential being developed. And the third thing is, which is D, we're skipping C for a second, is that in the yesh me'ayin, it can't exist without the source. Ila v'aro could exist independently without the support of its source. And the reason is because to begin with, it has its own identity. But it started off as a little dot, and now it's developed. That's all. Yeah.
How can we say that the yesh doesn't exist in I? Not
So think of it. Let's say Hashem created metal, wood. Does that mean in Hashem there's a little bit of woodness?
the potential for the level of
Very good, but that's already on a lower level. But within Hashem himself, let's go back to say that all the things that are created from the 10 spheres, could we say that in Hashem there are 10 spheres? Chas v'shalom? No. The 10 spheres are 10 ways Hashem manifests his light. But if we were to say that in Hashem himself there are 10 spheres, that would mean that he's not absolute one. He's made up of 10 different details. He's finite. So we'll say, no, in Hashem himself there's no 10 spheres, but there's 10 little dots that are the source for the 10 spheres. Still 10 little dots. Okay, so not 10 little dots. Let's say it's 10 micro dots that are the source for those 10 dots. That's still 10 something. So what is it? The answer is in Hashem, it's infinite. Because it's infinite, anything could come out of it. It's not limited. So when do the 10 spheres begin to exist? Once Hashem chose these 10. So for example, how come we have these 10 spheres, not others? I would say because that's Hashem's makeup. Chas v'shalom. Hashem could have created the world with 10 different spheres completely. If that would have been the case, it would have been a different world, not the one we know now. So the only reason why it's these 10, because he chose so, not because there's something in him that's already leaning towards these 10. When I do things, it's because there's something in me which is inclined to go in that direction. That's why I chose this, or I chose that. Let's say you have to choose something and you're looking for what color to choose. Why do you choose this color, not that color? There's something in you that you're drawn to this color more than the other color. There's something in you that you're drawn to this setting. That's why you want to live here and not there. But by Hashem, if we would say there's something in him, and that's why he chose to create the world with Chokhmah, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, that would make him finite. So what is he? He's infinite. Infinite means there's no form, no shape. Of course, not physically, not spiritually, not even a trace of a form of a shape. And therefore, he has the potential that from him, anything and everything could come. How many things could come out of him? Infinite. So it means, when is the beginning of the 10 spheres? Only once Hashem chose to create it, but not in him. And these 10 become lower and lower and lower, and that's where the shtalshlus begins. Oh, yeah, okay. At least someone understands it better than me. Okay. Okay, so we'll stop here. We'll give you a chance to breathe for 5 minutes, and we'll start the second class in Mashiach HaGulah. Yes.
שמה שאנחנו חושבים, לא, שמה,
אנחנו מרגישים.
אוקיי.
זה תוצאה ממה שאני חושבים. זאת אומרת, יש לכל בן אדם ערכים.
כן, כאילו אמרת שאני
הערכים שלי גורם את ההרגשות. למה אני אוהב זה או אוהב זה? values.
כאילו, מה שאני חושבת, מה שאני כאילו,
מה שחשוב לי.
אוקיי.
איך אני מסתכל על העולם. הוא רוצה כל החיים להשקיע את עצמו ולעשות כסף. לעשות כסף זה... ילד קטן, תינוק, משחק עם שטויות.
הוא לא יצליח, זה מה
הוא יותר מזה. אז הוא אוהב לשחק עם בננה.
זה אומר שאנחנו צריכים ללמוד מה...
איך אני מסתכל בראש, איך אני מבין דברים. זה קורה איך שאני ארגיש, איך אני מתייחס לדברים.
אני רואה את העולם, אני רואה את דברים.
זה גורם איך אני מרגיש יחד לדברים.
תודה.
Sorry.
No, actually,
Make money. You're trying to figure out your career? Oh, okay. Okay. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye, Shayna.
Thank you, Rabbi Majeski.
Very welcome. I didn't get a chance to get the tape, but I have one downstairs.
Okay, no rush.
Yeah, so
Not learning it right now, so.
on the way down, maybe after the test, I'll take it.
Okay.
Give it to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.